Modern women walk around with artificially inflated egos that have no basis in reality. Thanks to social media validation, dating app attention, and a culture that worships female mediocrity, the average woman now believes she deserves premium treatment while offering nothing in return. She's convinced that her mere existence makes her valuable, that her basic femininity entitles her to unlimited male resources, and that she's too good for 90% of the men who actually approach her. This ego inflation isn't happening by accident, it's happening by design, a system that deliberately overvalues women while undervaluing men to maintain psychological control over male behaviour. But here's what most men don't understand. Female ego isn't confidence, it's compensation. The louder she proclaims her worth, the more desperate she is for external validation to prove it. The more she demands to be treated like a princess, the more she knows she hasn't earned royal treatment. The bigger her ego, the more fragile her actual self-esteem. And this creates an opportunity that most men completely miss. To understand how to destroy women's ego, you must first understand how that ego is constructed. Modern female ego inflation is the direct result of attention abundance. Too many men giving too much validation to women who haven't earned it. Think about the psychological environment that created today's entitled women. From childhood, girls receive constant praise for basic existence. You're so pretty, you're so smart, you're so special. This continues through adolescence, where every social media post generates dozens of likes and comments from desperate males seeking approval. By the time she reaches adulthood, the average woman has received thousands of hours of unearned validation from men who wanted something from her. She's been told she's beautiful, intelligent, and valuable so many times that she actually believes it regardless of whether it's true. This creates a psychological dynamic where women expect validation as a basic right, rather than something that must be earned through actual value creation. They've been conditioned to believe that male attention is their birthright, that male resources should flow to them automatically, and that their approval is a precious gift that men should compete for. But here's the crucial insight. Artificial ego inflation requires constant reinforcement to maintain itself. The woman with genuinely earned confidence doesn't need constant validation because her self-worth is based on real accomplishments. The woman with artificial ego needs continuous external confirmation because deep down, she knows her elevated self-image has no foundation. This is why modern women are simultaneously more entitled and more insecure than any generation in history. They demand to be treated as high value while secretly fearing that they're not. They expect premium treatment while knowing they haven't earned it. They project confidence while desperately seeking validation. Here's the secret that destroys the entire female ego game. She needs your validation more than you need hers. Despite all her social media followers, despite all the attention she receives, despite all the men who orbit around her hoping for scraps of approval, she still needs validation from men she actually respects. The validation she receives from desperate men doesn't actually boost her ego. It inflates it artificially while leaving her core insecurities untouched. She knows that desperate men will validate anything female, so their approval has no real value. What she craves is validation from men who have options, standards, and the psychological strength to reject her. This is why women become obsessed with men who don't chase them. It's not because they enjoy being treated poorly. It's because validation from a man who doesn't need her approval actually matters to her self-esteem. The desperate man's compliments are worthless currency. The selective man's approval is psychological gold. The woman who demands to be treated like a princess secretly knows she's not royal. The woman who insists she's high maintenance knows she's not providing high value. The woman who claims she's too good for most men knows she's not actually better than them. Her ego is a house of cards built on the foundation of male desperation. The moment that desperation is removed, the entire structure collapses. This is why the most effective way to destroy female ego isn't to attack it directly, it's to stop feeding it. Women's egos are inflated because male attention has become abundant and therefore worthless. The cure is making your attention scarce, and therefore valuable. When you stop giving away your approval for free, it becomes a commodity that women will compete to earn. Most men approach women with the energy of a salesman trying to convince a customer to buy a product. They compliment her appearance, agree with her opinions, laugh at her jokes, and generally behave like they're grateful for her time. This creates a psychological dynamic where she becomes the buyer and he becomes the seller. But here's the reality. You're not trying to sell yourself to her. You're interviewing her for a position in your life. You're not seeking her approval. You're determining whether she deserves yours. You're not trying to impress her. You're evaluating whether she's impressive enough for you. This fundamental shift in perspective changes everything about how you interact with women. Instead of hoping she'll like you, you're deciding whether you like her. Instead of trying to prove your worth, you're requiring her to prove hers. Instead of seeking validation, you're providing it conditionally based on her behavior. The scarcity principle works because it aligns with biological reality. Throughout evolutionary history, the most desirable men had the most options, which made their attention scarce and valuable. Women developed psychological programming that makes them compete for attention from men who don't need it. When you operate from genuine scarcity, when your attention actually is limited because you have important things to do, standards to maintain, and options to consider, women instinctively recognize this and respond accordingly. They stop demanding special treatment and start earning it. The fastest way to deflate female ego is to remain completely unaffected by her attempts to manipulate your emotions. Women test men constantly through emotional provocation, dramatic statements, and subtle insults designed to make you react defensively or seek their approval. When a woman makes a disparaging comment about your appearance, your interests, or your choices, she's not actually expressing her opinion. She's testing whether you need her approval to feel good about yourself. When you react defensively, explain yourself, or try to change her mind, you're proving that her opinion matters more to you than your own. The non-reaction strategy works because it demonstrates that you don't need her approval to maintain your self-esteem. When she says something designed to make you insecure, and you respond with calm indifference, you're showing her that her opinion has no power over you. This is psychologically devastating to women because it reveals that their primary tool for controlling men, emotional manipulation, doesn't work on you. They're accustomed to men who react to their provocations, who seek their approval, who adjust their behavior based on female feedback. But here's the crucial distinction. Non-reaction doesn't mean being rude or dismissive. It means being genuinely unaffected by her attempts to control your emotional state. When she tests you, you remain calm and centered. When she provokes you, you stay psychologically stable. When she tries to make you insecure, you maintain your confidence. The woman who can't affect your emotional state through manipulation begins to question her own value. If her usual tactics don't work on you, it means you're either higher value than she initially assessed, or you have options she doesn't know about. Either way, her ego begins to deflate. The most effective way to destroy female ego is to communicate higher status without appearing to try. Women are constantly scanning for status indicators to determine where men rank in the social hierarchy. The man who can demonstrate value through his behavior rather than his words automatically positions himself above her. Status communication works through subtle behavioral patterns that women unconsciously recognize. The high-status man doesn't seek approval, he gives it conditionally. He doesn't react to tests, he remains unaffected. He doesn't chase, he allows himself to be pursued. He doesn't explain himself, he expects others to understand him. These behavioral patterns trigger women's biological programming that makes them defer to higher-status males. Throughout evolutionary history, women who could accurately assess male status and position themselves accordingly were more likely to survive and reproduce. This created unconscious response patterns that still operate today. When you communicate from a position of implicit status, women automatically begin to question their own position relative to yours. The woman who was demanding special treatment suddenly starts working to earn your approval. The woman who was testing your boundaries suddenly starts respecting them. But here's the key. This status must be genuine, not performed. Women can sense the difference between authentic confidence and fake superiority. The man who genuinely believes in his own value communicates it naturally through his behavior. The man who's trying to appear high status creates try-hard energy that women instinctively reject. Authentic status communication comes from having genuine reasons to believe in your own value, real accomplishments, clear purpose, authentic confidence, and legitimate options. When these elements are present, you don't need to convince women of your worth because it's evident in everything you do. The reason women's egos have become so inflated is that men have forgotten the value of their own commitment. In the biological marketplace, women control access to sex while men control access to commitment. But modern men give away their commitment as freely as women give away their social media photos. Your commitment, your attention, your time, your emotional investment, your exclusive focus is the most valuable thing you have to offer. It's what women actually want, regardless of what they claim to want. Sex is temporary, validation is fleeting, but commitment represents security, resources, and long-term value. When you give away your commitment too easily, you're essentially telling women that it has no value. When you shower them with attention before they've earned it, you're communicating that your time isn't important. When you become emotionally invested before they've demonstrated their worth, you're showing that your feelings don't matter. The woman who receives easy commitment from men learns to devalue it. She begins to believe that male attention is her birthright, that masculine resources should flow to her automatically, and that she doesn't need to provide value in return. This creates the entitled attitude that characterizes modern female ego inflation. But when you treat your commitment as valuable currency that must be earned, women's behavior changes dramatically. They stop demanding special treatment and start working to deserve it. They stop taking your attention for granted and start competing to maintain it. They stop expecting free resources and start providing value in return. Understanding commitment currency allows you to reset the entire dynamic. Instead of chasing women who don't appreciate you, you create conditions where women chase you. Instead of trying to prove your worth, you require them to prove theirs. Instead of giving away your value, you make them earn it. Every interaction with a woman involves subtle power dynamics that determine who controls the frame of the relationship. The person who backs down first, who compromises their position to avoid conflict, who adjusts their behavior to maintain harmony, that person surrenders psychological control to the other. Women constantly test men's psychological strength through various forms of pressure and confrontation. They make challenging statements, create dramatic scenarios, and present ultimatums designed to see if you'll maintain your position or cave to their demands. The man who consistently backs down first loses her respect permanently. The game of chicken works because it reveals who has more to lose from the interaction ending. The person who's more invested in the outcome will always back down first to preserve it. The person who's less invested can afford to maintain their position because they don't need the relationship to continue. This is why outcome independence is so crucial in dealing with women. When you genuinely don't need her approval, validation, or presence in your life, you can afford to maintain your boundaries even when she threatens to withdraw her attention. When you're desperate for her approval, you'll compromise your position to avoid losing her. The woman who realizes she can't manipulate you through threats, ultimatums, or emotional pressure begins to question her own value relative to yours. If you're willing to risk losing her rather than compromise your principles, it means you either have other options or you value your integrity more than her approval. This psychological realization is devastating to female ego because it reveals that she's not as valuable as she believed. The man who won't back down, who won't compromise his position, who won't sacrifice his principles for her approval, this man is demonstrating that he's higher value than she initially assessed. But here's where most men fail. They try to win the game of chicken through aggression rather than indifference. They become argumentative, defensive, or confrontational when they should remain calm and unmoved. The goal isn't to defeat her, it's to remain unaffected by her attempts to control you. Understanding why women develop inflated egos helps you respond to them more effectively. Female ego inflation isn't conscious malice. It's unconscious psychological programming designed to extract maximum resources from men while providing minimum value in return. Throughout evolutionary history, women who could convince men of their superior value received more resources, protection, and commitment. The women who successfully inflated their perceived worth beyond their actual worth were more likely to survive and reproduce. This created psychological programming that makes modern women automatically overvalue themselves. The biological programming operates below conscious awareness. Most women don't consciously decide to be entitled, demanding, or manipulative. They're following unconscious scripts that tell them to extract maximum value from men while providing minimum investment in return. This programming also explains why women's egos are so fragile despite appearing strong. The woman who constantly demands validation doesn't actually believe she deserves it. She's desperately trying to convince herself and others that she's valuable. The woman who insists she's high maintenance knows she's not providing high value. The woman who claims she's out of your league secretly fears she's not even in the game. Understanding this biological programming prevents you from taking female behaviour personally. She's not rejecting you specifically. She's following unconscious scripts that tell her to test male value and extract maximum resources. She's not being entitled because she hates you. She's being entitled because her programming tells her this strategy maximizes her evolutionary advantage. But here's the crucial insight. Biological programming can be overridden by conscious choice. When you understand what's driving her behavior, you can choose not to participate in her unconscious games. When you recognize her ego inflation as compensation for insecurity, you can respond with the confidence that destroys her artificial self-image. Modern women's egos are largely built on the foundation of social media validation. Likes, comments, followers, and attention from men they'll never meet. This digital validation creates a psychological bubble where women believe they're more desirable than they actually are. The social media delusion works because it provides constant positive feedback without requiring real-world value creation. A woman can post a photo and receive hundreds of likes and comments telling her she's beautiful, amazing, and perfect. This creates artificial self-esteem that has no basis in actual accomplishment or character. But here's what women don't understand. Social media validation is meaningless. The men who like her photos and leave thirsty comments aren't actually options. They're digital servants providing free validation without expecting anything in return. The attention she receives online doesn't translate to real-world value or genuine relationship prospects. The woman who bases her self-worth on social media metrics is essentially living in a fantasy world where she's more valuable than reality suggests. She's confusing digital attention with actual desirability, online validation with real-world worth, and virtual options with genuine opportunities. When you encounter a woman whose ego is inflated by social media validation, you can deflate it by demonstrating that her online worth doesn't impress you. You don't like her photos, you don't follow her accounts, and you don't validate her digital persona. You judge her based on her real-world behavior, character, and value, rather than her online image. This approach is psychologically devastating because it forces her to confront the difference between her digital self-image and her actual worth. The woman who's accustomed to receiving constant online validation suddenly finds herself dealing with a man who's unimpressed by her virtual achievements. The key is to remain completely indifferent to her social media presence while focusing on what she actually brings to your life. When she realizes that her online validation doesn't matter to you, she begins to question whether it matters at all. Destroying female ego requires consistent application of psychological principles that force women to confront the difference between their inflated self-image and their actual value. This isn't about being cruel, it's about refusing to participate in their delusion. The first step is eliminating validation-seeking behavior from your interactions. Don't compliment her appearance unless she's earned it through her actions. Don't agree with her opinions unless you genuinely share them. Don't laugh at her jokes unless they're actually funny. Don't give her attention unless she's providing value in return. The second step is maintaining your standards regardless of her reactions. When she tests your boundaries, maintain them. When she demands special treatment, require her to earn it. When she tries to manipulate you emotionally, remain unaffected. When she threatens to withdraw her attention, let her. The third step is treating your time and attention as valuable resources that must be earned. Don't be available whenever she calls. Don't prioritize her schedule over your own. Don't sacrifice your goals for her convenience. Don't give her unlimited access to your emotional energy. The fourth step is requiring her to demonstrate value before receiving benefits. Don't take her to expensive restaurants until she's proven she's worth the investment. Don't give her emotional support until she's provided it to you. Don't make her a priority until she's made you one. The fifth step is remaining outcome independent throughout the process. Don't change your behavior based on her reactions. Don't compromise your principles to keep her interested. Don't sacrifice your standards to avoid conflict. Don't need her approval to maintain your self-esteem. If you're recognizing the truth in this analysis, if you're tired of dealing with entitled women who provide no value while demanding everything, I encourage you to like this video and subscribe to this channel. Your engagement helps ensure that these conversations continue, that men start understanding the psychological dynamics that allow women to maintain inflated egos. When you start destroying a woman's ego, she won't accept it passively. She'll fight back using every psychological weapon in her arsenal to restore her inflated self-image and regain control over your behaviour. Understanding these tactics helps you remain unmoved by her attempts to manipulate you. The first weapon is emotional manipulation. She'll create dramatic scenarios, manufacture crises, and use tears to make you feel guilty for not providing the validation she craves. She'll claim you're being mean, unfair, or cruel when you're simply refusing to participate in her ego inflation. The second weapon is social pressure. She'll try to turn your friends, family, and social circle against you by portraying herself as the victim of your cruel treatment. She'll claim you're emotionally unavailable, commitment phobic, or impossible to please when you're simply maintaining your standards. The third weapon is sexual withdrawal. She'll use sex as a tool to manipulate your behaviour, providing it when you validate her ego and withdrawing it when you don't. She'll claim you're not meeting her emotional needs when you're simply not feeding her artificial self-esteem. The fourth weapon is comparison. She'll point out how other men treat her better, how her ex-boyfriends were more attentive, or how she has other options who appreciate her more. She's trying to make you jealous and insecure so you'll compete for her attention. The fifth weapon is gaslighting. She'll deny that her ego is inflated, claim that she's not demanding special treatment, and insist that you're the one with the problem. She'll try to make you question your own perceptions and doubt your assessment of her behaviour. The key to surviving this psychological warfare is understanding that her escalation is actually evidence that your strategy is working. The woman whose ego is genuinely deserved doesn't need to fight to maintain it. The woman whose self-worth is based on real value doesn't need to manipulate others to validate it. When she fights back, it's proof that her ego was artificial and that you're forcing her to confront reality. The harder she fights, the more threatened she feels by your refusal to participate in her delusion. Destroying female ego isn't a one-time event. It's an ongoing process that requires consistent application of psychological principles. The woman who's accustomed to inflated self-esteem will constantly test your resolve and try to return to her previous patterns. The long-term strategy involves creating a relationship dynamic where she must continuously earn your approval rather than receiving it automatically. This doesn't mean being withholding or cruel. It means requiring her to demonstrate value before receiving benefits. You accomplish this by maintaining your standards regardless of her reactions. When she provides value, you acknowledge it. When she doesn't, you don't. When she acts entitled, you remain unimpressed. When she demonstrates genuine worth, you appreciate it appropriately. The goal isn't to destroy her self-esteem, it's to force her to develop genuine self-worth based on actual accomplishments rather than artificial validation. The woman who learns to earn your approval through her actions develops real confidence that doesn't require constant external reinforcement. This process benefits both parties. She learns to base her self-worth on real value rather than artificial validation. You get a partner who actually deserves the treatment she receives rather than someone who demands it without earning it. But here's the crucial point. Not all women are capable of this transformation. Some women are so addicted to artificial validation that they'll never develop genuine self-worth. Some women prefer the fantasy of inflated ego to the reality of earned confidence. The woman who can't adapt to reality-based self-worth isn't worth your time or energy. The woman who insists on being treated like a princess without earning royal treatment doesn't deserve your commitment. The woman who can't function without artificial ego inflation isn't psychologically healthy enough for a genuine relationship. The reason this approach is so effective is that it aligns with biological reality rather than social conditioning. Throughout evolutionary history, women were attracted to men who had options, standards, and the psychological strength to reject them. This created unconscious response patterns that still operate today. When you refuse to participate in female ego inflation, you're demonstrating that you have options, standards, and psychological strength. You're showing that you don't need her approval to feel worthy, that you won't compromise your principles for her attention, and that you value yourself enough to require her to earn your commitment. This behavior triggers women's biological programming that makes them attracted to high-value men. The woman who can't manipulate you through ego inflation begins to see you as higher value than she initially assessed. The woman who can't control you through emotional manipulation starts to respect your psychological strength. But here's the most important truth. This approach only works when it's authentic. You can't fake psychological strength, genuine confidence, or real options. Women can sense when you're trying to appear high value versus when you actually are high value. The man who genuinely doesn't need female validation behaves differently than the man who's pretending not to need it. The man who actually has options acts differently than the man who's trying to appear like he has options. The man who's authentically confident communicates differently than the man who's performing confidence. This is why the ultimate solution isn't learning techniques to destroy female ego. It's developing genuine psychological strength that makes you immune to ego inflation in the first place. When you're truly confident, valuable, and purposeful, you don't need to destroy women's egos because their artificial self-importance doesn't affect you. The choice is yours. You can continue participating in the game that inflates female egos while deflating your own self-worth. Or you can develop the psychological strength that makes you immune to their manipulation and attractive to women who actually deserve your commitment. One path leads to continued frustration with entitled women who provide no value while demanding everything. The other leads to genuine relationships with women who earn your respect rather than demanding it. Choose wisely. Your psychological sovereignty depends on it.